This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. You're sitting in a saloon that smells of gun oil, stale beer, and too much sweat for a place with only 6 people inside. The piano stopped playing an hour ago, and the only music now is the clink of glass and the wheeze of lungs that aren't ready to quit. Your eyes settle on the pale man in the corner. He's hunched slightly over the table, dressed sharp but worn, gray suit, frayed around the edges, boots more dust than leather. He's got a handkerchief to his mouth again. Blood, bright and fresh. He folds it away like it's nothing. Then someone across the room makes a joke. Something about a sick pup wasting space. The pale man glances up, slow and steady, like he's not just heard it but tasted it. You don't even see him reach for his weapon. Just a flicker, then a bang. The air goes still. The loudmouth drops his glass, and then his body. Face first. Nobody else moves. That's Doc Holliday. And you're probably not surviving this night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead. Drop your location and what time it is where you are right now in the comments. It's always interesting to see who else is wandering the dusty roads of the past with you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Ellipsis. He was born John Henry Holliday, August 14, 1851, in Griffin, Georgia. Not exactly a name that screams gunfighter. But back then, destiny didn't come with labels. His father, a soldier and a Southern gentleman, raised him in the kind of household where manners were as sharp as knives. You grow up with tutors, Sunday school, and the occasional duel just outside town, because sometimes good breeding requires a warning shot. Doc wasn't always coughing into cloth. As a boy, his lungs were clean, his diction polished, and his path clear. Medicine, or law, or something respectably boring. He chose dentistry, trained in Philadelphia. Yes, that's right. Our infamous gambler gunman once handed out toothbrushes and root canals like Halloween candy. He even set up a practice in Atlanta. Porcelain teeth and polite conversation. But here's the part that slips through the cracks of most retellings. The South was still bleeding. Reconstruction wasn't just a historical phase, it was a living wound. And young Doc grew up in a household where the Confederacy's loss wasn't just bitter, it was personal. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was 15. His adopted brother? A disabled war orphan. His hometown? A shell of its former self. You don't walk out of that clean. No one does. Now, most folks get a sore throat and complain. Doc got a cough and moved west. He was 22 when he got the diagnosis. Tuberculosis. Terminal. The doctor didn't mince words. Dry air might buy you time. But not much. So he left. Shut down the dental office. Packed what little dignity he had left. And headed west, not for glory. Not for gold. But to outrun death with a 6-shooter in hand. Historians still argue whether he ever actually wanted to live long, or just live fast enough to matter. He started in Dallas, Texas, opened a dental practice, gave it a real try. But the cough was getting worse. And the patients, well, they don't exactly line up for a dentist who keeps spitting blood between appointments. So Doc took up cards. Poker was quiet, clean, and more forgiving than root canals. But the thing is, he was good. Scary good. Cold eyes. Steady fingers. No tells. And if someone thought he was cheating, they usually didn't get a second guess. Because here's the truth. Even before the legend, Doc Holliday had already killed. Maybe it was self-defense. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was just Tuesday. There's a famous anecdote, might be true. Might be whiskey-fueled folklore. A man accused him of marking cards in a Dallas saloon. The man drew first. Doc drew second, but faster. Left the man gasping on the floor, bleeding from a hole he didn't expect. And Doc? He didn't run, just leaned down, whispered something no one else could hear, then finished his drink. You can't make that stuff up. Or maybe you can. Either way, you're hooked. He was 23. Tuberculosis, riding shotgun. Cards in one hand, pistol in the other. No home, no family. Just saloons, rail towns, and the occasional graveyard detour. And yet, in every town he drifted through, he left a name behind. Not always a good one, but never a forgettable one. And you, sitting there in this same dark bar decades later, can't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, you've walked into one of his stories. The man wasn't born to be a killer. You remind yourself of that as you picture lace-curtained parlors, dusty Georgian verandas, and the low hum of cicadas echoing through the trees. Long before the poker chips and pistols, John Henry Holliday lived in a world of linen shirts and polite smiles, proper, orderly, southern. You find yourself standing beside him in the warm, sticky heat of 1850s Georgia, where magnolia trees whisper secrets and reputations stretch longer than the roads. His father, Major Henry Holliday, had returned from war with pride and scars in equal measure, first from Mexico, later from the Civil War. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a man of station. The Holliday household was one of social standing, where Sunday attire was ironed to perfection and children were expected to quote scripture between spoonfuls of grits. John was the only surviving son, raised with the kind of care you reserve for fine china. He was bookish, articulate, and notably bright. Latin, Greek, mathematics, none of it troubled him. He played piano, read poetry, and could debate theology before puberty. There's a quiet pride in the way his tutors described him. A mind too sharp for its own time. But the mind wasn't the only thing setting young John apart. He was also born with a cleft palate. It was corrected through surgery, but the remnants remained. A faint speech impediment and a determination that burned deep. People underestimate children who sound different. John didn't forget those whispers. His mother, Alice, was his world. She taught him grace and patience. She read to him when his speech faltered. She gave him poise in a place that worshipped masculinity and expected it loud. Then tuberculosis took her, quietly, like it always does. She coughed one day, and never stopped. Doc was just 15. That's when something shifted. You see it, don't you? The well-raised boy with shining shoes suddenly watching the most elegant person in his world rot from the inside. No gods or angels stepped in. Just the slow march of disease. It does something to you. Makes you understand that decay doesn't wait for sinners. It comes for saints too. Soon after, his father remarried, to a woman barely older than John himself. The friction was immediate. He left home shortly after. First to Valdosta Institute, then to the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery in Philadelphia. And yes, he excelled. Became a doctor of dental surgery by 20. There's even a plaque somewhere still bearing his name. Funny, isn't it? Historians still argue whether his path to dentistry was a genuine calling or simply a respectable escape from grief. You step into his Atlanta office for a moment. Polished wooden floors, a brass spittoon, the scent of carbolic acid clinging to the air. He's there, lean, tailored coat, clean gloves, spectacles balanced on his nose, gentle hands, steady breath. He's treating a child with a sore molar. There's a tenderness in his voice as he says, "This won't hurt, I promise." And it doesn't. He never breaks that promise. But his lungs do. The cough arrives slowly. First as a tickle, then a rasp. Eventually, the blood comes too. You don't need a second opinion. He knows what killed his mother has found him too. Consumption, tuberculosis, whatever you call it. It means death is on a timer now. His colleagues notice. Patients begin to leave. A dentist who can't stop coughing. Bad business. He tries to mask it with handkerchiefs and laudanum. But it's no use. So he does the one thing every Southern gentleman is taught not to do. He runs west. Somewhere between Georgia and Texas. John Henry Holliday dies. Doc Holliday takes his place. You want to believe it's poetic. That a man dying by degrees becomes something else. Something tougher. But it's not transformation, it's survival. The West doesn't care if you're refined. It doesn't reward sensitivity. It respects grit. And if grit has to wear a pistol, so be it. Doc arrives in Dallas. And you'd expect him to start drinking and shooting. Right? Wrong. He applies for a dental license. Partners with a friend. Hangs up a shingle that says, Griffin and Holliday. DDS. There's even a newspaper ad. Imagine that. Doc Holliday. Taking appointments. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Specializing in molar extractions. But the patients? They notice. The cough. The blood. The way he steps outside every 15 minutes to clear his throat and stare into the sun. Business dies slowly. Like everything else. So one day he walks into a saloon. Lays down a silver coin. And buys into a poker game. Not for fun. Not for thrill. But because his rent is due. And guess what? He wins. And then wins again. By the third night, someone accuses him of cheating. And someone else reaches for a gun. You know what happens next. The gun's drawn. The insult avenged. The legend begins, not with glory, but necessity. You can still picture the man bleeding out by the card table. While Doc calmly reaches for his winnings. He doesn't smile. Doesn't gloat. He just coughs. And keeps playing. You're somewhere outside Fort Griffin, Texas now. And the air tastes like dust and desperation. Every step kicks up more of it. Your boots crunch over sun-baked gravel. And the wind howls low across the plains, like it's warning you. Too late. That something bad's coming. You glance at Doc Holliday walking beside you. His cough louder than the breeze. Tuberculosis isn't just a disease, it's a drumbeat. It sets the rhythm of your days. Doc knows this. He's 24, maybe 25 by now. And the clock has been ticking since Philadelphia. The doctors said he had a year or two. That was 3 years ago. Every breath is a borrowed one. And still, he rides, drinks, and draws faster than most men blink. He doesn't run from death anymore. He courts it, flirts with it, winks across saloon tables and calls its bluff with every duel. You wonder, watching him from across the room, if he's brave or just plain tired. They say he was once shot at while brushing dust off his vest. Didn't flinch, just sighed, looked at the shooter, and muttered, "Must be Tuesday." Is it true? Maybe. But in towns like these, myth and man are married by convenience. It's in Fort Griffin where he meets her. Mary Catherine Horney, better known as Big Nose Kate. Though no one calls her that to her face if they value their teeth. She's Hungarian, speaks 6 languages, drinks more than he does, and could outshoot half the men in town. Their first conversation ends in a shouting match. Their second ends in bed. The third, well, she's bailing him out of jail. You know, the usual romance arc. Doc's health doesn't improve, but his edge sharpens. With every coughing fit, he seems more vicious at the card table. He develops a reputation, cool under pressure, deadly when cornered, and never, ever, bluffing. That's not a poker metaphor. He really doesn't bluff. If he says he'll kill you, he's not posturing, he's just informing you early. One night, a drunk stumbles into the table, spills whiskey on Doc's sleeve, and calls him half a corpse. Doc looks him in the eyes, smiles thinly, and whispers, "Half's enough to bury you." The man laughs. Then Doc shoots him in the leg. He lives, barely, and never plays cards again. Historians still argue whether Doc truly killed dozens, or whether the stories just grew legs and spurred themselves into legend. He drifts from town to town, Denison, Trinidad, Las Vegas, the New Mexico one, not the neon one, and eventually Dodge City. Always coughing, always drinking, always gambling, but something changes in Dodge. You walk into the Long Branch Saloon one afternoon and find him in a staring contest with another man, tall, broad, quiet. A badge glints on his chest. That's Wyatt Earp. And the room gets colder when they shake hands. There's no gunfight. Not that day. But the future shifts slightly on its axis. Doc and Wyatt become friends, or allies, or brothers, depending on which story you read. They share something, an understanding that the law is a tool, not a promise, that the line between justice and vengeance is only visible when it suits the powerful. Doc starts riding with lawmen. Sometimes he is one, deputized, paid to chase down stagecoach robbers and cattle thieves. Other times, he's just the friend of the guy with the badge. Either way, he still drinks, still gambles, still shoots faster than reason allows. You lean against a fence post and watch as he lights a cigar with a trembling hand. His lungs are on fire, but his aim never wavers. That's the part people can't explain. How a man so visibly dying still hits center mass from 30 feet in a windstorm. Maybe it's the rage. He once told a bartender, "It's not about dying, it's about making sure I take someone with me." And the way he said it, soft and simple, chilled the entire bar into silence. Doc's always been dying. That's not the tragedy. The tragedy is that everyone around him started dying too. Because when you carry death in your lungs, it leaks into everything you touch. And as you follow him out of Dodge, into the next dusty town and the next poker game, you realize, he's not running out of time anymore. He's daring it to catch him. The saloon tonight stinks of sweat, stale beer, and something sharp, gun oil. Maybe, or just fear. You push through the doors and the piano stops playing, almost like it recognizes who's walked in behind you. Doc Holliday isn't wearing a gun belt. He doesn't need to. He's got a small derringer tucked inside his vest, a knife in his boot, and a reputation that walks 3 steps ahead of him like a shadow with fangs. He's not here for trouble tonight, but that's rarely up to him. You take your seat at the table across from him, cards already dealt, chips stacked neat, hands cleaner than the consciences in this room. His eyes are glassy but alert, a little blood still on his cuffs from the last coughing fit. The man should be in bed, or a hospital, or a grave, but here he is, pouring whiskey with one hand and shuffling cards with the other. The dentist's precision never left. His fingers still move like he's threading sutures between molars. Only now, they're calculating tells, twitching for triggers, tapping out Morse code rhythms of risk and reward. You learn fast. Poker is his cathedral. He doesn't bluff. He doesn't flinch. And he never, ever, tolerates being called a cheat. One man makes that mistake. Late 1870s. Maybe in Denver. Maybe in Trinidad. Depends on who's telling it. But the bones of the story never change. A cowboy, half drunk and full of himself, slaps his cards down and accuses Doc of marking the deck. The room freezes. Doc doesn't blink. He simply stands, smooth as silk, and says, "I have 2 guns, one for each of you." Then silence. The kind that burns. He doesn't even draw. Doesn't have to. The cowboy folds his ego, his cards, and probably a little bit of his dignity. Leaves without a backward glance. That's the kind of man Doc was becoming. A ghost with a draw faster than rumor. But let's be honest. You can't build a life on card games alone. Not even in the West. So Doc drinks. A lot. Whiskey. Laudanum. Opium when it's bad. It numbs the cough. Dulls the rage. Keeps the fever dreams quiet. You wonder if he even knows how much of himself he's losing between the bottle and the bleeding. Historians still argue whether his alcoholism was a side effect of the disease, or a coping mechanism for the guilt he never talked about. Because here's the thing. Doc Holliday didn't just play cards and shoot guns. He watched people die, watched friends get buried in boots, watched diseases take mothers, brothers, even enemies, and all he could do was cough and wait his turn. It wears on a man. Big Nose Kate sees it. She stays by his side longer than most would, nurses him during the fevers, drags him out of saloons when he picks the wrong fights. She's fired to his ash, volatile, loyal, and just unstable enough to match him shot for shot. Once, in a desperate attempt to free him from jail in Kansas, she lit the building next door on fire to cause a distraction. You don't do that for just any man. You do that for someone you believe won't make it without you. And maybe he wouldn't have. But that didn't stop the bodies from piling up. Doc's reputation starts following him like a bad debt. He's no longer just a gambler. He's a gunfighter, a killer, the kind of man mothers warn their sons about, and daughters fall in love with anyway. You ride with him into Leadville, into Denver, into Cheyenne, every town a different shade of the same color, gray. He never stays long. The cough gets worse, the cards get heavier, the whiskey cheaper, and the men braver. There's always someone who wants to be the one to take down Doc Holliday. To say, "I killed the legend." None of them do. He shoots when he has to. Fast, clean, efficient. There's no flair, no movie theatrics, just lead, blood, and the same cold expression he gives whether he's cleaning his teeth or cleaning a gun. But still, he's slipping. You can see it. The laughter doesn't come as easily. The sarcasm dries out. His hands sometimes shake when he pours a drink. His eyes stay red longer after each coughing fit. You know the end is approaching. He does too. And yet, every time he sits at a poker table, every time he draws that tiny derringer, every time he stands up to someone with 2 lungs and no fear, you realize this. Doc Holliday may have been dying, but he never stopped fighting. Because when death gives you a countdown, you can either lay down and wait, or you can make sure every tick echoes with gunpowder. You barely catch the first shot. Just a crack, sharp and dry, like a knuckle popping against eternity. Then the second follows, louder, angrier, with a purpose you feel more than hear. When the dust settles, there's a man on the ground bleeding through his coat. And Doc Holliday is standing with a pistol in his hand in the same expression he wears while folding cards. It started with a slur. That's usually how it goes. A wrong word at the wrong time. In the wrong saloon. Aimed at the wrong man. Doc's cough may have softened his voice. But not his pride. The moment someone suggests he's a coward, or worse, diseased trash, you know it's ending in blood. Always does. You'd think, after the first 3 or 4 deaths, people would learn, but they don't. They see a pale, thin man with shaking fingers and assume that makes him easy. Until they see how fast he moves. And tonight, he's even faster. The man on the floor wheezes, clutching his stomach. He'll live, probably, maybe. Doc doesn't check. He turns, coughs hard into his handkerchief, and walks back to the table like nothing happened. Everyone else goes back to drinking with the speed of people who enjoy breathing. This is where the bodies start piling up. Not in battlefields, but in back rooms and card halls. Doc doesn't seek violence, but he doesn't run from it either. When provoked, he answers, firmly, lethally, but always with style. You follow the trail. A man gunned down in Denver for drawing on Doc during a hand of faro. Another slashed in New Mexico during a knife fight gone sideways. One story claims he shot a man in the head mid-sentence because the insult was too ugly to finish. Historians still argue whether the number was 8, or over 20. The thing is, Doc Holliday wasn't a killer by trade. He didn't rob banks. He didn't rustle cattle. He didn't ride with outlaws or terrorize towns. He just reacted, like a match flicked too close to kerosene. His killings weren't about money or infamy. They were always about respect. Or what was left of it in a man coughing up pieces of his lungs every morning. And yet, there was still something gentlemanly about it. He dressed impeccably, carried himself like a professor, not a gunman. He quoted Shakespeare in gunfights. Once, he corrected a man's grammar before shooting him in the leg. You can't make this stuff up, and if you did, it wouldn't be half as good. There's one particular story, maybe in Las Vegas, New Mexico. A local bully, big, drunk, cruel, starts harassing a waitress. Doc doesn't say a word, just stands, and everyone in the room stops breathing. The bully turns, laughs, calls him a walking corpse. And Doc? He says, I may be dying, but you're about to be dead. Then he draws. Just once. The man doesn't even get his pistol halfway out. That's the contradiction you start to live with. Doc was dying, but somehow more alive than everyone around him. He didn't fear death. He was death. Thin, polite, and dressed in gray. Big-nosed Kate watches it all. Sometimes she storms out after a fight. Sometimes she patches him up with trembling hands. Once, she tells him, "You're going to hell, Doc." He smiles, lights a cigarette, and replies, "Already there, darling." Their love is volcanic, explosive, but enduring. She sticks with him through jail time, gunfights, and nights he can't stop coughing long enough to speak. They yell, they drink, they love, and then they do it all again the next night. Some relationships are built on dreams. Theirs is built on fire. But the fire can't keep him warm forever. You notice it now. Doc's slower. His aim's still perfect, but he takes longer to stand. He sleeps more, eats less. Sometimes, you find him staring at nothing, lips moving silently. Prayers? Regrets? Or maybe just arguing with ghosts he didn't bury deep enough. Yet every time someone tries to write him off, he proves them wrong. In Trinidad, he stops a robbery by calmly putting a bullet through a would-be thief's collar. In Silver City, he bluffs a poker table into folding with nothing but a queen and a death stare. And everywhere he goes, people whisper his name like it's cursed. Doc Holliday, the dentist who became a gunslinger, the gentleman killer, the man who walked into Death's saloon, ordered a drink, and dared it to shoot first. And as you ride into the next town, dust stinging your eyes, you realize you're watching a man outrun fate not because he hopes to win, but because he wants the chase to matter. You ride into Dodge City under a sun so bright it feels like judgment. The streets are half mud, half smoke, and fully alive with sin. Cowboys swaggering, gamblers dealing, and preachers shouting into the dust. And there, leaning against a saloon wall like he owns the horizon, is Doc Holliday. He's thinner than last time, skin pale enough to haunt, but the fire in his eyes still burns, low and steady, like coals in a dying stove. He's dressed sharp, as always, gray suit, silver vest chain, hat tipped just enough to suggest trouble. And standing next to him, mustache twitching and boots polished like mirrors, is Wyatt Earp. Now there's a pair. You know how some friendships make perfect sense? This isn't one of those. Wyatt is a lawman, tall, clean-cut, calm. Doc is, well, the opposite. But together, they balance each other out like a loaded scale. Wyatt brings the law, and Doc brings the teeth. Historians still argue whether their bond was loyalty, strategy, or just shared loneliness. Whatever it was, it changed the West. You trail them through the Kansas dust, Wyatt chasing fugitives, Doc guarding his back. They drink together, fight together, bleed together, and if anyone thinks the tuberculosis makes Doc a liability, he's quick to prove otherwise. Once, a drunk gambler reached for Wyatt in a backroom scuffle. Doc didn't hesitate, just stepped in, fired once, and the threat was gone. Wyatt said later, "I've never had a better friend." That's high praise in a town where most people wouldn't loan you a match. But friendship doesn't make Doc any easier to live with. He's moody, sharp-tongued, and drinks like he's trying to drown time itself. One day he's charming the mayor's wife with a Latin proverb. The next, he's vomiting blood behind the stable. And through it all, Wyatt stays, maybe out of loyalty, maybe because he knows one thing for certain: when the shooting starts, you want Doc Holliday at your side. You follow them to Tombstone next. That's where the air starts to crackle. The town's name isn't just dramatic, it's prophetic. Silver's been found, and where silver goes, greed follows. Lawmen, rustlers, bankers, cowboys. They're all circling each other like wolves in a pen too small for civility. The Clantons and McClowrys run cattle and suspicion. They don't like outsiders, especially not ones with badges or deadly reputations. Doc fits both. He doesn't try to play nice, doesn't smile unless he means it. His cough is louder now, persistent, the kind of cough that echoes through walls and whispers. Not much longer now. But if death's knocking, Doc doesn't answer. He just tightens his cravat and drinks another glass of bourbon. You're in the saloon, the night tensions hit boiling. One of the cowboys throws a slur at Wyatt. Doc steps in. The man mocks Doc's cough. Bad idea. Doc, without breaking eye contact, says, "You're a daisy if you do." It's one of those phrases that sticks to history like blood to a boot. The next morning, you hear whispers. The Earps are gearing up. There's talk of a showdown. The OK Corral. You think you know this story. Everyone does, but they don't tell it right. It wasn't a duel at high noon. It was mid-morning, dust choking the sky, confusion everywhere, and it wasn't at the corral itself. It happened in a vacant lot nearby. Squeezed between buildings, tight, cramped, nowhere to run, nowhere to breathe. You're standing just behind them, Wyatt, Morgan, Virgil, and Doc. 4 against 5. The cowboys are armed and waiting. Tension so thick it's practically audible. Doc stands out, coat open, shotgun hidden beneath. He's coughing again, but his eyes never leave the targets. Then, a shout, a draw, gunfire. You barely track the chaos. Shots explode like fireworks on a funeral pyre. When the smoke clears, 3 cowboys lie dead. Doc has a graze on his hip. His face? Calm, almost bored. Later, someone asks if he was scared. He replies, "I was in more danger at my dentist's chair." Only Doc could turn a shootout into a punchline. But the aftermath isn't clean. The press demonizes the Earps. The cowboys cry foul. The town divides. And suddenly, being right doesn't mean being safe. You ride back to the saloon that night. Doc's there, of course. Drink in hand, blood on his shirt. He lifts his glass to you and says, "This town's going to bury us all." He wasn't wrong. You wake to the sound of boots on wood and the murmur of a town that no longer pretends to be civilized. Tombstone has changed. You can feel it in the air, heavier now. Charged, like lightning about to strike. The gunfight at the OK Corral didn't end anything. It just lit the fuse. Doc Holliday sits at the end of the saloon bar. Same corner, same cough. He's paler now, as if the desert sun has decided he's no longer worth burning. A half-empty glass rests beside a tiny tin of opium gum. Not for pleasure, just to keep the pain 2 inches away instead of 1. The Earps are marked men now. The cowboys want blood, and they're not subtle about it. Ambushes, snipers, whispers in the alleys. When Virgil Earp gets shot walking home from the Oriental Saloon, you know the rules are gone. No more warnings, no more law, just vendetta. You watch as Wyatt transforms. The man who used to enforce order now moves like someone with nothing left to lose. Morgan Earp is gunned down next. Shot in the back through a billiard hall window. You help carry his body. Doc walks behind the stretcher. Lips thin, shoulders rigid, no tears, just that cough. That's the moment it shifts. You're there when Wyatt gathers his posse. No legal warrant, no courtroom, just a list of names and enough ammunition to erase them. Doc insists on joining. He's already dying, might as well take a few with him. They call it the Vendetta Ride. Historians still argue whether it was justice or revenge, whether the law backed Wyatt, or just looked the other way because it feared him more than the cowboys. You mount your horse. Dust swirls around the group like a shroud. There's no marching band, no heroic music, just saddle leather, loaded rifles, and silence. The first man they find is Frank Stillwell, hiding near a train station in Tucson. The reports are contradictory. He was armed. He wasn't. He reached for a weapon. He begged for mercy. But you were there. You saw the smoke, the bullet holes, the way Doc's eyes looked afterward. No joy, no regret, just one less name on the list. Then comes Indian Charlie, Curly Bill Brocious, Johnny Barnes. The desert drinks their blood one by one. The line between lawman and killer gets blurrier by the mile. Doc doesn't care. Maybe he stopped caring when the blood in his lungs drowned the last bits of sentiment. And in one skirmish, the one people don't sing songs about, Doc is caught in the open. A cowboy fires from the ridge. The bullet misses, but barely. Doc drops to one knee, coughs blood into the dirt, then returns fire. The shot hits dead center. The cowboy crumples. You see it then, not just his speed, but his will. The man is dying, but he refuses to go quietly. At one point, Wyatt asks him, "Why are you still riding with me, Doc?" And Doc answers without turning his head, "Because you're the only one who doesn't pity me." That might be the truest thing he ever said. There's a moment near Dragoon Mountains when you all take shelter in a dry ravine. Doc's face is gray. His hands tremble. He leans against a rock, bottle in hand, pistol beside him, and says, "I'm tired, Wyatt, but not done." Then he laughs. A dry, wheezing sound. "God's going to have to hire more cowboys if he wants to catch me." By the end of the ride, the posse has thinned, the blood has thickened, and the wanted posters now bear your faces. Doc isn't a gambler anymore, or a dentist, or even a sidekick. He's a specter, a ghost riding shotgun with a lawman who's no longer interested in law. And you? You've stopped asking where this road leads. Because the only thing waiting at the end is a grave. The dust never quite settles in Tombstone, and neither does Doc Holliday. After the Vendetta ride, you return to a town transformed, paranoid, splintered, whispering through clenched jaws. Wyatt Earp is gone, headed toward Colorado with a battered badge and a price on his head. The cowboys have scattered, but not disappeared. And Doc is still here, drinking bourbon like it's holy water and coughing like death's trying to claw its way out of his lungs. He drifts now, aimless, untethered, no more posses to ride with, no more brothers to avenge. Just a man with no future and too much past. You sit with him in a boarding house one night, listening to the wind scrape against the shutters like ghost fingernails. His breathing's ragged, but he insists on shuffling cards. "You know what they said about the OK Corral?" he murmurs. "Said it lasted 30 seconds. 30 seconds and 3 men dead. Ain't that something?" He pauses, eyes distant. "Felt like years. That's the thing no one tells you. Legends are heavy. You don't carry them, they carry you. Like a casket you had to drag through every bar, every town, every newspaper headline that gets it wrong." Historians still argue whether Doc regretted the shooting at the OK Corral. Whether he saw it as duty or just another inevitable crack in the foundation of a world already crumbling. The newspapers had a field day. Gunman dentist goes berserk. Corral carnage. Cowards in badges. Some called Doc a hero. Others labeled him a murderer with better tailoring. There's no in-between. There never is for men like him. You walk the streets with him now and notice how folks look away. The way children cross to the other side. Doc doesn't mind. He prefers it. Actually, easier not to get attached. He says, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. "You live longer if no one loves you." Of course, that's a lie. He still writes to Kate. Still keeps a tattered photo in his vest. One you've never seen but know exists by the way his hand rests near that pocket when he's had too much to drink. And he always drinks too much. There's one night you won't forget. A gambler from New Orleans calls him out during a game in Bisbee. Says Doc's cheating. Doc doesn't rise, doesn't reach for his gun. Just leans forward and says, "Son, I've been called worse by better men. Now fold, or let's settle this outside." The gambler folds. Not because he's afraid of dying, but because he knows Doc isn't. That's the power now. Doc's not a man anymore, he's a reckoning. But the legend begins to fray. He coughs more, sleeps longer, eats less. Once, you find him passed out in a chair with a bottle in his lap and a Bible on the floor. Open to Ecclesiastes, the verse about time and season. You pick it up, place it on the nightstand, and pretend not to notice the tear stain on the page. He starts seeing things. Or maybe you do. Shadows that move wrong. Footsteps behind you even when the streets are empty. A phantom pressure in the room when Doc speaks about death like it's a familiar houseguest. One evening, While watching the sunset stain the sky blood red, he turns to you and says, "You think God knows what I've done?" You try to answer, but he waves it off. "Never mind. He wasn't there." You don't argue. Because maybe he wasn't. Doc tries to return to Denver. But even the air there hates him now. He can't breathe without rasping. He walks like a skeleton with a purpose. Each step defying the coffin that's been following him for years. And yet, there's still fire. In Durango, some brash deputy mistakes him for a vagrant and tries to rough him up. Doc drops the man with a slap and a stare. No pistol needed, just presence. Some men carry guns. Doc is one. The saloons still welcome him. They know he brings trouble. But he also brings story. And in a place where myths pay better than morals. That's good for business. But you start to wonder, how much more myth can a man survive? Doc leans against the bar one night. Whispers to no one in particular. "I should have died 10 years ago. Maybe I did. Maybe this is just the echo." And for the first time, you believe him. You're riding with ghosts now. The desert stretches out before you like parchment scorched with stories no one dares to tell twice. You and Doc aren't chasing anything anymore, just circling the memories. No more vendettas, no more law, just two weary outlines on the edge of history's firelight. You find yourselves in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, not by choice, but necessity. The altitude's high, the air dry, good for tuberculosis. They say, you've heard that before, it's never really helped, but at this point, it's not about cure, it's about stalling the inevitable. The town is small, almost sleepy. Steam rises from the mineral springs, promising healing in the form of sulfur and hope. Doc doesn't believe in either. The only thing those waters cure is sobriety. He mutters through cracked lips as he's helped into the Hotel Glenwood. The hotel is modest, quiet, the kind of place where you can die without making too much noise. You help him into a second-story room with a window overlooking the Colorado River. He sits in the chair by the sill, bundled in every coat he owns. Even though it's July, his eyes scan the horizon as if expecting someone. Maybe Kate, maybe Wyatt, maybe death, finally deciding to show its face. He tries to play poker, but his fingers don't work like they used to. The cards slip, the shuffle stumbles, his lungs wheeze. Every breath sounds like rust scraping against bone. You get whiskey when you can. The staff turns a blind eye. They know who he is. Or who he was. Word travels fast, even up here in the mountains. "Doc Holliday?" A clerk whispers. "The one from Tombstone?" Someone else replies. "I heard he killed 20 men. Then another voice. "No, he killed time." Historians still argue whether he was truly dangerous or just dramatically misunderstood. Some say he only killed in self-defense. Others say he enjoyed it. You don't say anything. You were there. You know. His moments of clarity come and go. Sometimes he jokes. Sometimes he stares at the ceiling like it's going to split open and swallow him. One day he says, "Wyatt's alive. You know. Still out there. Being all righteous and grim." You nod. Doc sighs. "He'll die with a badge. I'll die with a whiskey glass." Then he chuckles, which turns into a fit of coughing that leaves blood on his shirt and silence in the room. Every few days, a letter arrives from Kate. You read them to him. Her Hungarian curses, her anger, her love. You can tell he hears her, even when his eyes stay closed. He smiles in that crooked way, like a man trying not to admit he still cares. You sit with him at night, listening to the river outside. He doesn't say much anymore. His words are rationed now, like ammunition, but when he speaks, they stick. "I always thought I'd die with a gun in my hand," he whispers one night, staring at his own trembling fingers. "Instead, I got this damn deck of cards and a bed that smells like medicine." He pauses. "But I guess I had enough shootouts for 10 men. Maybe this is fair." You ask him if he's afraid. He looks at you, eyes clearer than they've been in days, and says, "I'm just curious. Been chasing death for so long. I want to see what I was running from." And then, one morning, he doesn't get up. You find him lying back in bed. Thin hands folded, eyes shut, no gun, no fight, just stillness. They say his last words were, "This is funny." Maybe because he died in bed instead of in a blaze. Maybe because he beat the odds longer than anyone expected. Maybe because, after all the noise, the end was so quiet. You helped carry his body down the hotel stairs. No parade, no headline, just a casket and a whisper. He's buried in Linwood Cemetery. Up on the hill, overlooking the town he never meant to die in. But even now, you swear you hear him sometimes. Shuffling cards, laughing under his breath, telling death he'll be right there, in just one more hand. The wind in Glenwood Springs still carries his name. You walk through the rows of crooked gravestones and find his marker near the edge of the cemetery, simple. Weather-worn, set into rocky earth that refuses to forget. The words are sparse. John Henry, Doc Holliday, 1851 to 1887. No epitaph, no legend, just dates, as if that's enough to contain everything he was. You stand there for a while, long enough for the sun to shift, for the shadows to grow longer across the cracked earth. You wonder if anyone ever really knew him. Not the killer, not the gambler, not the lawman's loyal friend, but the man who watched his mother die too young. Who ran west with a death sentence in his lungs and defiance in his blood. You think about how he used to sit on that hotel balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the river roll past like time itself. And how even then, broken and bleeding, he still carried himself like a man ready to shoot eternity in the eye. After his death, stories spread faster than wildfire. Some say he killed 30 men. Others say he only killed himself slowly. Every night at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. Hollywood picked its favorite version. He became a silhouette with a southern drawl. A gambler with perfect aim. A romanticized relic with a cough that never seemed to matter in the script. But you saw the tremors, the fever dreams, the way he'd stare at his own reflection and mutter, "Not dead yet." You remember the nights he couldn't sleep because every creak in the walls sounded like justice, or revenge, coming back for its dues. The legend says he was a killer. The truth is, he was a man who never stopped hurting. Big Nose Kate never remarried. She lived another 50 years and insisted she be buried beside him. Some say she told the undertaker, "Bury me next to the only man who could keep up with me." Even when dying, historians still argue whether they were soulmates or two wildfires that happened to burn side by side. It doesn't matter. They found each other. That's more than most can say. You travel south again, visiting the towns that once bore his footsteps. Dodge City, Tombstone, Trinidad. In each, there's a bar stool he once sat on. A bullet hole someone swears he made. A story whispered between drinks that starts with, "I heard," and ends with a half smile. In Tombstone, you find the alley where Morgan Earp was shot. The sun glints off the window. Just like that night, you remember Doc's silence after the murder. How his jaw clenched and his fists trembled not from fear, but from inconvenience, like he knew he'd had to kill a few more men now. And he was already so tired. You stop by the OK Corral, now dressed up for tourists. A gift shop, a sign with painted silhouettes. Doc's name on a t-shirt. You almost laugh. He'd have hated it, or maybe he'd have bought the shirt just to wear it ironically while playing cards in the corner. You end up in a saloon in Bisbee. The bartender's wiping down the counter. There's an old derringer mounted on the wall, labeled, "Holiday's Last Gun." You know it's not. Doc buried that one himself under a cottonwood tree just outside town. Said, "I'll need it in the next life." And maybe he did. The piano player starts a tune, slow, dusty, a little off-key. You close your eyes, and for just a moment, you're back in that saloon with him. Smoke in the air, cards on the table, the whisper of a cough behind a grin. He looks over at you, tips his hat, and says, "Well now, guess we're both still cheating the odds." You smile, because legends never die. They just wait for someone to remember them properly. The road ahead is quieter now. The kind of quiet that lingers after the final shot's been fired. When the crowd's gone home and the dust starts to fall like ash. You keep riding, not because there's anywhere left to go, but because stopping would feel like letting him go. 2. Every town you pass carries a piece of him. A card game he won. A duel he survived. A woman who still swears he kissed her hand and called her, darlin', before vanishing into the night like smoke through a keyhole. You stop in Prescott for a night. Doc once passed through here. Stayed just long enough to win a pile of cash. Lose it, then win it back again. Classic Doc. A man who lived like time owed him something. And maybe it did. There's an old man in the saloon who remembers him. He was polite. The man rasps, sipping at something too strong for someone that age. Dangerous, sure, but polite. Said, please, before he shot a man's finger off. Doc didn't have fans, he had witnesses. Historians still argue whether he belonged to the age of the gunfighter or if he was the last of a breed the West itself tried to forget. A man trapped between codes, one of Southern gentility, the other of frontier justice. You saw it. He lived with one foot in a parlor, the other in a coffin. You think back to a night in Denver, not long before Glenwood Springs, when he sat by the fire and asked, "You think I'll be remembered?" You told him yes, of course, the world wouldn't dare forget him. But truth is, he didn't want to be remembered for killing. He wanted to be remembered for surviving, for being more than just a myth with a pistol, for being the man who spit in death's face and said, "Not yet." So you carry the memory for him. You visit the site of the old Hotel Glenwood. It burned down decades ago. Nothing left but charred stone and memories. Still, you sit in the same spot where his window once overlooked the river. Let the wind hit your face. Close your eyes, and you almost hear it, his laugh. Low and rattling, like a gambler who just folded a royal flush because it was funnier that way. Sometimes you swear you catch glimpses. A man in a gray coat, watching from across the street. A whisper in a crowd that sounds like his drawl. You blink, and they're gone. That's how legends work. You head back to Georgia eventually. To Griffin, his birthplace. The house is gone, but the land remembers. You run your hand along a rusted gate and wonder what young John Henry Holliday would think of the man he became. Probably laugh. Probably cough. Probably say, "Better than dying boring." You read about Wyatt's last years. He made it to Los Angeles. Lived until 1929. Saw the birth of Hollywood. Lived to see actors play him on screen. He always spoke of Doc with reverence. Said he was the most loyal man I ever knew. Never forgot him. Neither do you. You find yourself at Linwood Cemetery again. Snow this time. A different season. Same stillness. You place a playing card on his grave, Queen of Hearts. His favorite, or maybe just the one he always drew before someone accused him of cheating. You stand there a while. Long enough for the cold to bite your fingertips and for silence to settle like a second skin. And then you say it. Softly, like a prayer. Still not dead yet, Doc. The wind carries it away. There's something strange about returning to a world that kept moving after he left. The West is changing. Railroads cut through the land like veins. Telegraph wires hum above the once empty plains. The outlaws are gone or pretending to be businessmen. Towns that used to smell like gunpowder and sweat now host Sunday picnics and church bells. You walk through one of these new towns. All brick sidewalks and polished windows. And feel like a ghost yourself. Trailing the echoes of a man too wild to fit in a world this clean. Somewhere between a dentist's chair and a saloon floor. The country moved on. But Doc Holliday? He didn't bend. He broke. There's a bookstore now where one of his old haunts used to be. You browse for a minute, half expecting a pistol under the poetry section. Instead, you find a dime novel, The Deathless Holiday, Terror of Tombstone. On the cover, a cartoon version of him grins like a devil. Guns blazing in both hands. Bodies surrounded by smoke and beautiful women. You laugh. Then you don't. Because that's what they turned him into, a caricature. A campfire ghost story. All swagger and no soul. A man reduced to punchlines and pulp pages. But you were there. You remember the nights his cough shook the walls. The way he tried to laugh through fever sweats. How he played poker with hands trembling so hard they looked like they belonged to someone else. You remember the silence between gunshots. The weight he carried that no one else could see. Historians still argue whether he wanted to be famous. Some say he chased it. Others that it was an accident of proximity. Ride with Wyatt Earp long enough. And legend follows you like smoke. But fame was never his currency. He traded in loyalty. Loyalty to Wyatt, to Kate, to the code of men who never broke promises, just laws. There's a newspaper clipping framed in a Denver saloon. Old, yellowed, brittle, gambler dentist dead of consumption, known for guns, cards, and gallows humor. Below it, someone scrawled in pencil, he never smiled in pictures. But he always laughed before a fight. You spend time in those bars. Now, listening to the younger crowd tell stories about him. Most of them are wrong. They get the dates mixed up. The town's confused. Some say he was part of the Dalton gang. Others swear he rode with Billy the Kid. You correct them when you feel like it. But mostly, you just listen. Because stories, even wrong ones, keep him alive. Doc Holliday never had children. No estate. No family legacy. What he left behind was stranger. The space between fact and fiction. That weird twilight zone where legends fester and grow teeth. He's not in history books. He's in barstool whispers and the occasional drunken tattoo. But his presence? Still there. Like that night in El Paso. Where you swear you saw a man coughing into a silk handkerchief. Muttering under his breath in Latin. Or the time you found a playing card. Perfectly clean. On the floor of a boarded-up saloon. Queen of Hearts again. Coincidence? Maybe. But with Doc, nothing ever felt accidental. You ride through Arizona one summer. Retracing his steps through the mountains. You camp under stars so bright they seem like bullet holes punched into the night sky. You sit by the fire, bottle in hand, and wonder how much of the legend is real, and whether that even matters. Because Doc wasn't just a man. He was a lesson. That you can be sick and still dangerous. That you can love and still be cruel. That you can die slowly and still go down shooting. And most importantly, that the measure of a life isn't how long it lasts, but how deeply it carves its name into the silence. You sit alone in a darkened saloon long after closing. The floorboards creaking beneath memories that haven't been invited in years. The bartender let you stay because you said his name. Doc Holliday. That name still opens doors. You pull out a small stack of playing cards and lay them on the table. Not to play. Not really. Just to feel something familiar. The flick of the cards. The weight. The shuffle he perfected. Even when his hands trembled like leaves in a storm. You close your eyes and try to picture his final days. Not the ones etched into legend, but the quiet ones. The ones no one wrote songs about. Doc Holliday didn't go out in a blaze of glory. He faded. Slowly. Painfully. Like the last note of a dirge played too often. But even then, he tried to live by rhythm. He still played cards. Still cracked jokes. Still raised an eyebrow at death like it was an annoying dinner guest. In those final weeks at Glenwood Springs, you remember sitting by his bed while he wheezed and wheezed. Lungs clawing for something they'd never hold again. He looked at you and said, "It's a hell of a thing. Not being afraid anymore." You asked him what he meant. He smiled. Slow and dry. "I'm too tired to care if I wake up." That night, he dealt one last hand. Just for fun. His eyes were dim, but his fingers still moved like they remembered better days. The winning card? Queen of Hearts, of course. You both laughed until he coughed blood again. That ended the game. Historians still argue whether he welcomed death or merely tolerated it. Some call his end tragic. Others, inevitable. But you saw it. And what you saw was peace. Not a man beaten. A man done fighting. After his death, Wyatt tried to carry on. He never quite found another friend like Doc. How could he? The West was changing, too fast for men like them. Wyatt faded into photographs and court transcripts. Doc, into whispers and warnings. Years later, a young gunslinger came into town boasting he was faster than Doc Holliday ever was. Some old-timer laughed and said, "Son, Doc's been dead for decades. And you still couldn't outdraw his shadow." That's the thing about men like him, they linger. Doc left no children, no memoir, but he did leave echoes. A silver derringer in a museum with a nameplate. A letter from Kate, folded so many times it became unreadable. A half-told story in a mining camp where someone swears he once dealt 5 aces just to win an argument. And of course, the cards. You pick one up from your little spread on the table. Queen of Hearts. You smile. He always said it reminded him of Kate. Beautiful, dangerous, and usually right. Your glass is nearly empty. The room is nearly dark. And still, the presence hangs in the air, like cigar smoke and tension. Like someone's watching from the doorway. One hand resting just close enough to the butt of a pistol. Maybe he is. Sometimes when you shuffle a deck, you swear the cards feel warmer. Sometimes when you cough, you think of him and laugh at the irony. Sometimes when you're alone long enough, you hear a raspy voice whisper, "I'll be your huckleberry." You nod to the empty seat across from you. "Yeah, Doc, you always were." It's dusk in Tombstone again. The town looks different now, quieter, cleaner, almost ashamed of what it used to be. You walk the boardwalks where cowboys once swaggered and gamblers once cheated time with every deal. The OK Corral is roped off with tourist placards and cheap reenactments. Someone's selling commemorative t-shirts. Another guy's in a fake mustache trying to do a Doc Holliday impression. It's, well, something. But you're not here for the performance. You walk past the crowd, past the tour guide's voice-mangling facts into entertainment, and step into the shadows of the alley just behind. You lean against the same adobe wall where Doc once stood, loaded shotgun in his hands, daring the cowboys to twitch. You close your eyes. You can still hear it. That tension, that silence before the gunfire, that 30 seconds that stretched across eternity. Doc didn't fire first that day. He waited, let them make the mistake. But when he moved, it was with precision born from thousands of close calls and one incurable disease whispering in his ear. What have you got to lose? Historians still argue whether he was legally justified, whether he crossed a line or stood his ground. But you were there. You remember the way he stepped forward, coat flapping, sweat on his brow, a cough caught in his throat, and no hesitation in his eyes. That day sealed the legend. But it also sealed his fate. Doc never found peace again. Not really. Fame like that is a curse with a better tailor. He couldn't enter a saloon without someone whispering, "That's him." Couldn't draw a card without someone wondering if a gun would follow. But maybe that was the point. He didn't want peace. He wanted meaning. Back at the cemetery in Glenwood Springs, someone's left a bottle of bourbon beside his grave. Half drunk. Like him, someone else left a dental tool, symbolic. Maybe, or just ironic. And then, taped to the stone, a note. "Thanks for showing us how to go down swinging." You smile. You know he would have hated that. Too sentimental. Too neat. Life was never neat to Doc. It was messy and cruel and beautiful and violent. And through all of it, he remained impossibly himself. You pass through Las Vegas, New Mexico, the one with grit, not casinos, and stop at the old saloon where Doc supposedly dealt his most infamous hand. The place is boarded up now. You peek through a dusty window and see your reflection. Just you, older now, quieter. But sometimes, when you walk away, you swear another set of footsteps follows, measured, slow, accompanied by the faint click of a tin cup or the rasp of a drawn breath. You don't turn around. Doc wouldn't like the sentiment. Instead, you find yourself back at a campfire one night, deck of cards in hand, stars above you blazing through desert sky. You shuffle, Slow and deliberate. You deal 2 hands. One for you. One for him. You sip once. Place your cards face up. Queen of Hearts. You wait. And the wind rises. You almost hear his voice again, calm. Sarcastic. Just a little amused. Don't get soft on me now. And then it's gone. You rake in the cards. Stir the fire. Let the stars have their silence again. Because some men don't vanish. They just become part of the land. Part of the myth. Part of the air we breathe when the world dares us to draw. You find yourself back in Georgia, where this all began. The fields are green here, not red with dust. The trees stand like quiet sentinels over old roads. And the air hums with crickets instead of gunshots. You walk a path you imagine young John Henry Holliday once took, before the coughing. Before the whiskey. Before the pistol ever left his coat. It's peaceful in a way the West never was. And yet, it feels wrong. Because Doc wasn't made for peace. He was forged in friction. Born into a crumbling Southern aristocracy. Refined into a gentleman. Then sandblasted by loss and death into something sharper. Stranger. And unforgettable. The town has changed. There's a plaque near the church steps. Birthplace of John Henry Holliday. DDS. Gambler. Gunfighter. Legend. Below it, someone scratched the word dentist deeper into the metal. You wonder if Doc would have laughed or spit. You sit on a bench across from the old cemetery where his mother rests. You remember what he told you once. When he was half drunk and fully honest, I watched her die slow. And I knew right then, death don't play fair. So why should I? That moment broke something in him. Rewired his compass. Made him walk west not for fortune, but to keep outrunning something that had already caught up. Historians still argue whether Doc's descent into violence was inevitable, or just a tragic accident fueled by illness and bad luck. But you know better. It wasn't a descent. It was a transformation. One man gets tuberculosis and fades away in a bed of flowers. Another becomes a storm in boots with a derringer hidden in his vest and a Latin curse on his lips. Doc made a choice. To live like every breath might be his last. And to make sure no one forgot the sound of it, you travel back to Glenwood one last time. The climb to the cemetery is steeper now. Or maybe your bones just know what's waiting at the top. His grave hasn't changed. People still leave mementos, cigars, cards, silver coins, a fresh red rose today. Probably from someone who only knew him through legends. You add your own offering. A cracked tooth from a poker chip. One he split years ago when he slammed it against a whiskey bottle during a losing streak. Even the chips are against me, he muttered. You both laughed. Until the coughing started again. You stay until the sun drops behind the mountains. Painting the sky the same bruised purple Doc always said reminded him of gun smoke at twilight. And as the wind picks up, and the stars begin to pierce the sky, you say it, one final time. Not dead yet, Doc. And maybe you're right. Because he lives in every gambler who bets too high. Every outlaw who rides alone. Every soul who refuses to go quietly. He lives in the drawl of old saloon doors. In the whisper of cards against felt. In the echo of a cough followed by laughter. Followed by silence. He lives. Still. Always. Now. Slow down your breathing. Let the dust settle in your chest. Doc Holliday's story doesn't ask for applause. It asks for memory. The kind that lingers after the fire's gone out. The kind that whispers to you when you're alone and everything else feels too quiet. Let his footsteps fade back into the dirt roads of the past. Let the smoke from that last hand of cards drift up, soft and spiraling, into a sky that's seen too much. He didn't ask for legend. He didn't ask for redemption. He just asked to live. And somehow, he did, longer, louder, and with more fire than anyone ever expected. Through sickness, through betrayal, through 30-second gunfights and 30-year myths. So wherever you are now, bedroom, truck cab, candlelit porch, breathe easy. The gun's been holstered, the whiskey's half full, and the night, for once, isn't chasing you. You don't need to remember every date, every bullet, every town he passed through. Just remember him. The man who died coughing in a Colorado bed, and still managed to outrun death for 20 years. Let that be enough. Now close your eyes, if they're not already shut. Sink into the stillness. The story's done, but the echo? That lingers. Forever.